Canadian Stage is a landmark theatre company on the Toronto theatrical scene and has been so for the past 20 years. And I am extremely honored and excited to have been invited back to Toronto, my hometown, in order to direct this company. I've been living myself in Europe for the past 30 years, and so I'm rediscovering what an exciting city this is, what amazing artists this country has been producing over the past 30 years. And it's been very exciting for me to try to discover how to integrate both the changes that have been taking place in this city and the evolution that has been taking place within the artistic community into a season for Canadian Stage. The season that we've put together has been constructed along two bases. One is the tradition of Canadian Stage, which is great text-based theatre, great plays, not only by Canadian writers, but also from writers around the world. And at the same time, to present the work and produce the work of artists who are going beyond the text in their exploration of a theatrical vocabulary. They can be working with dance, they can be working with singing, with opera, with film, with visual arts. They still use the theater as the basis for their narratives and for their storytelling, but they explode the boundaries of the theater in the way that they tell these stories. They are the women and men who are inventing an aesthetic, inventing new theatrical vocabularies, inventing ways of taking what are fundamental stories for humanity and saying, this is why these stories are necessary. This is why they need to be told today, and this is the way in which they need to be told. So that style of work, that force of directorial vision is something that is absolutely essential in the work that we are going to be presenting at Canadian Stage. The Berkeley Street Project is an initiative through which we collaborate with a number of Toronto independent theatre companies in order to present their work. This year, 3 very dynamic, very thought-provoking directors are going to be included in the Canadian Stage season.
It is about a woman who inadvertently has caused the death of her friend by neglecting a request for a favor that her friend asks. And so it unfolds into not so much, you learn very quickly that her friend has died, but it's really the telling of the tale, the unraveling, and her own confrontation of what has gone down.
The Middle Place is a documentary play created from interviews with youth and staff at a Rexdale shelter. The interviews were done by Andrew Kushner, who edited the 400 pages of transcript down to what is now the play.
The play is inspired by an event that happened in a small northeastern Polish town called Jedwabne in 1941. Very small rural community, one of many small towns. And in 1941, 1,600 Jews in the town were rounded up, put in a barn, and set on fire. And it was one of several towns where events like this happened. It's a stunning piece of theater, perfectly suited to Studio 180.
We're also very excited to present the first of our international Spotlight series. Toronto is a hugely international city, and we felt it was essential that Canadian Stage celebrate that international element. Our first international Spotlight this year is the Spotlight on Italy, celebrating some of the work of Italy's most innovative and most accomplished young artists. It's also a way of celebrating the fact that Toronto has a huge Italian population. They are the people who helped to construct this city and continue to do so, and are such a vital part of both our culture and our economy and our connection to the international world. Fernando Krapp wrote me this letter is by one of Germany's foremost playwrights today, Tancred Dorst. It's, in all appearances, a traditional love story between a young man, a young millionaire, his new wife, and his wife's supposed lover, a count, a destitute count. But this tale has a very, very, very unexpected twist. A brilliant piece of theatrical craftsmanship. I'm delighted to make it my Canadian stage directorial debut. St. Carmen of the Main by Michel Tremblay, directed by the National Arts Centre's artistic director for the English language theatre, Peter Hinton, is probably one of the great iconic plays in the Québécois canon, being presented this year in a new translation by Linda Gaborio.
The play is about politics, culture, revolution, and cost. In St. Carmen of the Main, Carmen has returned from Nashville, where she has been training in her yodeling and has returned to Quebec as a country and western singer. And what she does for her return is, rather than singing country and western, she sings songs about the Main. And the Main, for those of you who know, is St. Catherine and Saint Laurent Boulevard. It is the nightlife of Montreal. I think the play is exciting for an audience because it's not often you get to see this form of theater. And by that I mean the Greek tragedy form, especially applied to the Canadian context.
Studies in Motion is a play by Kevin Kerr, but also a groundbreaking project conceived and directed by Vancouver's Kim Collier and the Electric Company.
Edward Muybridge is considered by many the father of film. So there was a famous wager that happened back in the day of questioning whether at any time in a horse's gallop, all four hooves are off the ground. So Leland Stanford and Edward Muybridge began a process where they built and pioneered the technology to try to capture that horse in motion. It's that famous photograph that many of us know of the dark galloping horse. The play thematically looks at the relationship between the intuitive, more passionate animal self and the rational self, and that internal debate that goes on inside us as we wrestle our way through life. It also looks at, how do I go on once everything I know is gone? And certainly that happens for Muybridge, and it can happen for all of us. So the play is looking at that survival and that question of how do you go on?
David Gregg is probably Scotland's most important playwright today, very rarely performed in Canada thus far, and we're extremely pleased and proud to be able to do this work, especially with the collaboration and direction of Jennifer Tarver.
Well, what interests me about the play is that it speaks to a kind of universal harmony, or the idea of a universal harmony. And whether or not that's possible, whether or not it exists, whether or not that's something that people can tap into, if that's something that we can be aware of. This is the first time I'll have the opportunity to create a piece of theater on an operatic scale. And I think the play is operatic and musical in nature, and I also think the opportunity to be doing it in a huge theater, one of Toronto's biggest spaces, also lends that feeling to it. It's a play about space, it's a play about vastness. And so for me, at least in the theatrical form, that's quite new.
The Anderson Project by Quebec's theatre giant Robert Lepage is the tale of a Québécois songwriter who has been invited by the Paris Opera to write a story about the life and writings of Hans Christian Andersen. So it's a tale that spans the 19th century through to the very beginning of the 21st century. It's also an opportunity for Robert Lepage to surpass himself in what he knows best, that is how to create a universe of riveting images and incredible theatrical magic on a stage. For the past 30 years, Edward Locke has been astounding audiences around the world with the inventiveness of a choreographic language, pushing dancers beyond the boundaries of their normal physical capacities, telling stories of riveting beauty and entertaining us at the same time. We are particularly excited to include his 30th anniversary production based on two Baroque operas, Untitled, as part of our 2010-2011 season. Audiences get excited by seeing something on stage that they've never seen before. We go to the theater in order to have a twinge, in order to have that shiver up the spine, in order to be wowed, in order to find ourselves interrogated, not only by a subject or by a language or a story, but also by our sensations. We go back to the theater because we've experienced something there that we've never experienced before, or that we can't experience elsewhere.